So many times, we hear about the tragedies that others have endured, scaring ourselves under the covers and into closets when faced with danger. Well, today, we are going to hear about some people that refuse to be the victim, no matter what. And that deserves some airtime. So here are 7 badass people that I want to become best friends with right now. Enjoy. This happened to my wife's grandmother about 15 years ago, while we were still dating. Her husband had just passed away about a year previously, but she'd been going down to the library for volunteering, exercising, and socialization. This was in the winter, so her walk back was while it was getting dark. The library closed at 5, and then there were some extra things to do before everyone could actually leave. And on this particular night, she turned down a ride home from another volunteer because, damn it, she needed to stay in shape. Now, her house was about a mile away, through some lightly wooded area in South Texas. And she was about halfway home when she notices someone is behind her. He's walking the same direction and gaining on her, which in itself isn't all that odd. She's old, and thus not particularly fast. But in this case, he seems vaguely sinister. They keep walking. Pretty soon he's right behind her. Then he falls into pace, just staying behind her. Now she knows that something is up, but she's almost home. She can see the top of her driveway coming up, and she leaves her lights on so it'll look like someone's home. She just needs to make it another 150 yards, then 100. All that time, she said he was so close she could feel his breath on her neck. Maybe 50 yards to go and it happens. Strong hand on her shoulder.
Okay, bitch, don't turn around and hand over your purse or I'll fucking cut ya.
She stops for a second, takes one big step forward, turns around, and shoots the guy in the neck with a .38 she kept in her purse. It is Texas. The guy spent the next 5 years in a prison hospital before he died of complications. My wife's grandmother passed away last year. Up to the end, she lamented she pulled the trigger too soon. My late husband would have been embarrassed to know that I missed. This next story takes place in China, where loose guidelines allowed a shady landlord who wanted to clear out an entire village to do so by bullying and tormenting everyone who lived there. So put yourself in the shoes of 38-year-old Shen Jiang, who, along with the rest of his village, was given an ultimatum to leave his home or there'd be trouble. Eventually, 70 of the 100 families in Shen's village gave in and moved. And with so few holdouts, the threats only escalated. A gang of men mysteriously appeared and began harassing and beating people in the street. One day, when Shen's wife went out to buy some instant noodles, a gang of 30 to 50 men blocked her way out of the house and shoved her down, which understandably pissed Shen off. I should mention at this point that Shen was a devoted kung fu fan, which inspired Shen and his son to transform into a tornado of kung fu moves that knocked the ever-loving crap out of several of the thugs and scaring the crap out of the rest. Unfortunately, nobody thought to fire up a video camera during the fight itself, but you can see the aftermath in this video, which shows Shen calmly sitting in front of his house, surrounded by comatose heaps that used to be his attackers, while their as yet unsmacked down friends shout useless threats at him, maintaining a minimum distance of 10 feet at all times. A few minutes later, the police showed up and promptly urged Shen to sign the shit out of the papers his landlord had sent, warning him that he could be arrested for assault. Sadat Khan was cleaning up his shop when a guy walked in and shoved a gun against his head. Unfortunately for this criminal, Khan was no stranger to robberies, and he gave 0 fucks. The criminal screamed in Khan's face and demanded he empty the store's register, swearing to God that he'd kill him dead like so hard. Khan, showing only slight annoyance at the possibility of having his brains irradiated, carefully explained, "You're swearing to God, and you have a gun in your hand. Doesn't make any sense to me. If you believe in God, you shouldn't be holding a gun at my face, so you better leave." Now, the criminal, who I should stress had a gun, was not fazed by this, because A. Khan was a 49-year-old Indian man who probably weighed 100 pounds soaking wet, and B. he had a damn gun. Upon coming to the conclusion that the robber wasn't going to leave, even despite his amazing speech, Khan strolled to the counter and grabbed a handful of chili powder, which you'll note is absolutely not money, and threw it in the criminal's face, and then punched him with the chili-laced fist for good measure. Now, if you've ever touched your eyes or anything else after handling chili powder, you can imagine the criminal's immense pain, which was hopefully only compounded by the punch to the face and the resulting shame he felt as he ran bawling out of the store while Khan chased him. The best part, though, was Khan's reaction, as he claimed he wasn't a hero. He was just a guy trying to run a store. Robbing a bank is never as glamorous as it looks in the movies. But at least in real life, you don't have to worry about some muscle-bound action movie hero busting in and slapping your shit to the ground. That is, unless your name is Matthew Rogers, and you decide to rob a bank that Eddie Peoples, Army Staff Sergeant and Iraq War veteran, happens to be visiting. The moronic criminal walked into a Bank of America in Sarasota, Florida, and pulled out a gun, otherwise known as Strike One, and proceeded to wave it around and point it at random people in the bank. Peoples and his 2 sons initially laughed at Rogers, thinking that the robbery was a joke. But to confirm his seriousness, Rogers then pointed the gun at Peoples and his children. Strike 2. Upon detecting the threat to his kids, Peoples went straight into Papa Bear mode, constructing a barricade around them from some nearby chairs. And then he switched over from fatherly instinct to army instinct. Rogers had the bank tellers fill a grocery bag with money, and on his way out he warned that the big, black guy shouldn't try to stop him. And if he did, the kid will get it, Rogers added, gesturing with the gun toward Peoples' sons. Strike 3. Peoples could not let that pass. Rogers fled the building and ran to his car. Peoples followed. Before Rogers could speed away, Peoples jumped into his van and blocked him in. Realizing that he was stuck between a rock and a hard place, Rogers, the moronic criminal, decided that the only appropriate course of action was to try and carjack Peoples' van and flee the scene. The second Roger put the gun to Peoples' head, he twisted it right out of his hand and introduced him to Sweet Lady Cement. Peoples stepped over Rogers and back into the bank where his oldest son asked, "Did you get the bad man?" Peoples' response, "Yep, I got the bad man," to which the bank erupted into applause. Oh, and Roger's gun, the criminal's gun, the one he used to rob the bank, turned out to be a realistic toy. Stephen Gorvet, drug addict, career criminal, and opportunistic thief, was strolling through an English neighborhood when his fingers got to twitching. Sitting nearby was a car with its doors open, radio blaring, just asking to be stolen. Stephen, not being one to turn down a free quickie from Madam Opportunity, hopped straight into the car and drove away. Little did he know, the car actually belonged to Keith Lovegrove, who was fixing a friend's fence when his musical accompaniment unexpectedly did a slow fade-out. Upon looking up and seeing his car rolling away, Lovegrove went over the fence and sprinted after it. After a few strides, Lovegrove leapt through the air and clung to his vehicle's bumper, where he was dragged for over 200 yards. Fortunately, the trunk was open, and when his car hit a speed bump, Lovegrove used the momentum of the bump to somersault himself into it. After flipping into the trunk, Lovegrove burst through the back seat and proceeded to grab the thief in a headlock and drag him out of the car, all while traveling at highway speeds. However, once outside the car, the thief managed to anticlimactically punch him in the face and escape. But how could a hopelessly drug-addicted criminal break free of the kung fu death grip of a guy who seconds earlier was clinging to the bumper of a moving car? Well, it probably had something to do with the fact that Keith was a 54-year-old ex-soldier at the time and officially registered as disabled. Just imagine what the guy was like in his prime. I'm going to apologize for my pronunciation of this guy's name. I tried to find the correct pronunciation and had no luck. Tex Palamaka was walking home with his wife when a mugger decided to try his luck. Now we have to assume that this mugger had no idea that the man he was about to attack was a man who knew all of the martial arts, which gave Palamaka the confidence to flatly tell his attacker to piss off, while ignoring his many threats of facial stab wounds. In the resulting 15-minute fight, the mugger at one point had his knee firmly planted on Palamaka's chest while he flailed wildly with the knife at his abdomen, thankfully failing to do any fatal damage. Unsurprisingly, Palamaka eventually managed to gain the upper hand and floored the mugger with a colon-punishing kick to the body. The mugger then tried to flee, only to be kicked by 2 lightning-quick donkey punches from Palamaka. But where was the mugger's knife during all this punching and kicking? Well, a post-fight x-ray of Palamaka's arm showed that the 6-inch blade got jammed into his arm, and Palamaka didn't even realize it had happened. Ivan Marcano, an off-duty NYPD cop, was sitting in the car with his girlfriend when he saw 2 punks pistol-whipping a man on the street. Marcano told his girlfriend to call 911 and stepped out of the car. The moment he identified himself as a police officer, one of the criminals immediately turned and fired a round straight into his chest. The thugs escaped in a white Mustang, with a third accomplice leaving Marcano for dead. His girlfriend helped him back into the car and made a beeline for the nearest hospital. Despite carrying a shooting victim, Marcano's girlfriend dutifully stopped at a red light, and that's when they saw it. A recently crashed white Mustang containing the 3 men. Climbing out of the car, Marcano clamped his left hand, his dominant hand by the way, over his bleeding chest wound and casually drew his gun with the other. Upon seeing the police officer they'd just blown away walking toward them like the friggin' Terminator, the men scrambled out of the car. Marcano ordered the people in the immediate vicinity to hit the deck, before letting off 2 one-handed shots, taking out his shooter with a headshot. The 2 other men ran for it. Marcano actually tried to give chase before a passing ambulance pulled up and asked if he needed help. He stopped for a quick chat with the crew before climbing into the back under his own volition. While recovering in the hospital, Marcano was promoted to detective by Mayor Michael Bloomberg and Police Commissioner Raymond Kelly for his heroism and all-around awesomeness. A moment that was luckily caught on camera since it's doubtful Marcano can remember it through the painkiller haze. Some people refuse to become the victim. When they are threatened, they run toward the monster instead of away. Saving the day, of course, and making the bad guys out there think again before doing something stupid. Has anything like this happened to you? Have you seen anything amazing, just like this, that you would like to see featured here? If so, please contact me through any of my social media links or email me at DuchessDark676@gmail.com. See you next time.